All right, so we are going to talk about filling in the unit circle. So I'm going to give you a couple of clues and tips on this and how to make this work. So we are looking at the X and Y intercepts first. So we're going to start over here just where we would start at our unit circle. And we know that this is at 0 pi, and we know it's 0 degrees. And this is an x-intercept of 1, 0. We also know that a full way around the circle is 2 pi, and it is 360 degrees. Going straight across from that, we know that half of 360, or half of a circle, is 180 degrees, and it's half of 2 pi, so it is 1 pi right there. Now, this is an x-intercept, and so is this side. So this is going to be on the negative side of x. It'll be -1, but our y is still 0. If we go and split our circle in half, and we go up this way and split that in half, we end up with half of our 180, which will be a 90-degree angle, and half of pi, because it's between 0 and pi, half of that would be half of pi, which would be pi over 2. Now this one's going to be a y-intercept, and it's at the positive of y, so it'll be 1, 0. Going down to the bottom, we know that this would be the other y-intercept, but it's on the negative part of y. So we know that this will be 0, -1, and you're already going, no, that should be 0, 1. So that is 0, 1 up there. Make sure you're paying attention. This is the y-intercept versus the x-intercepts. And the degree-wise, so if this was pi over 2, this was 2 pi over 2, this becomes 3 pi over 2. And if we're another 90 degrees past 180, 180 plus 90 will get us 270 degrees. Now, we've got the intercepts done. Let's go look at some of our other values. So we have 3 other parts in here. We know that it goes 2, it'll go 3, it'll go 4, it'll go 6. So it counts down from up there. So this will be pi over 3. This will be pi over 4. And this will be pi over 6. So I'm going to color code them a little bit so you can really kind of see what's going on. All of the intercepts are black, and the other ones are going to be in their color range. So this is also, if you think about and pay attention, these are like 15 degrees apart. This makes 2 15s, so this will be 30 degrees. 30 plus 15 will get us 45 degrees, and 45 plus 15 will get us 60 degrees. Now, if we continue on our path of doing the 15 degrees, this again would be 2 15s, and that would be 30 plus 60 gets us 90. Well, 90 plus another 2 15s would be 90 plus 30, which gets us 120. And note that the pi over 3 here goes straight across to this pi over 3, except it won't be just pi over 3. This is 1 pi over 3, 2 pi over 3. Now, if we look at the next part, this was 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. This will be 3 pi over 4. And this was 45 degrees plus 45 gets us 90. 90 plus 45 will get us 135 degrees. Now if we look at our pi over 6, this is 1 pi over 6. This would get us 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6. This will be 5 pi over 6. Again, that's 30 plus 30 would get us 60, plus 30 is 90, plus 30 is 120, plus 30 will get us 150 degrees. Now what I want you to notice is straight across from each other, those are pi's over 6, these are pi over 4, these are pi over 3. And that's going to continue through our unit circle. We'll come back and do our points here in just a minute. So let's go down below. So we've got the 150 and 5 pi over 6. Well, that 5 pi over 6 is going to hit right here. So this was 5 pi. This would be 6 pi over 6 because it would reduce down to pi. The next one will be 7 pi over 6. And 50 plus 30, because again that's a 30-degree gap, is 180. 180 plus 30 is 210 degrees. All right, next one is 3 pi over 4. We'll come straight on down. So this is 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, which reduces to pi, 5 pi over 4. 135 plus 45 gets you 180. 180 plus 45 gets you 225. You can also look at it as 210 plus another 15 gets you 225. Our next one is our 2 pi over 3. So this is 2 pi over 3. This would be 3 pi over 3. This will be 4 pi over 3. If we add 15 degrees to 225, we get 240 degrees. And we can also look at that as adding 60 plus 60 is 120, plus 60 is 180, plus 60 would get us to 240. Now we're going to come straight across here. We're going to go another 30, 60, so that's going to get us 300 degrees. And this was 4 pi over 3. This will be 5 pi over 3. We had 5 pi over 4. This would be 6 pi over 4, which would reduce down to 3 pi over 2. This will be 7 pi over 4. If we add that 15 degrees to 300, we get 315 degrees. On this one, if we add that 15 degrees again, we get 330 degrees. Here we have 7 pi over 6. This would be 8 pi over 6, which is 4 pi over 3 when we reduce it. This would be 9 pi over 6. This would be 10 pi over 6. This will be 11 pi over 6. So another thing I want to point out to you is that this is all 1 pi over a number, over 2, 3, 4, and 6. So 1 pi. This one is always 1 less than the bottom. So 2 is 1 less than 3, 3 is 1 less than 4, 5 is 1 less than 6. So 2 pi over 3, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 6. So 1 over, 1 less than the denominator. This one is 1 more than the denominator. So 6 plus 1 is 7, 4 plus 1 is 5, 3 plus 1 is 4. So 1 over, 1 less than the denominator, 1 more than the denominator, and this one over here, if I do 2 times 3, I get 6, and that's 1 less than gets me 5. 4 times 2 is 8, 1 less than is 7, 6 times 2 is 12, 12 minus 1 is 11. So this one is 1 less than twice our denominator. So 1 more than, 1 over, 1 less than, 1 more than, 1 less than twice our denominator. So that's the pattern that goes. The other thing I want you to notice is that if we match up the green ones going across, they kind of form a square there. It's a little hard to see, but there is a square where all 4 of those green ones hit. And that would be the same way if we look at the red ones, if we look at the green ones, or we look at the blue ones. They form a rectangle where they match up. So you can really notice the patterns and see what's going on there. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is our points. And we've talked about this in class. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. So on These, we've already discussed, those are the intercepts. Halfway between, as we found in class when we derived it, we end up with the square root of 2 over 2 for both our x and our y. Now, quadrant 1, which is this quadrant, is all positive. Everybody's positive. Our x are positive and our y are positive. So we're just going to work on that one first and then carry it through again. Now, when we come to pi over 6, we know between pi over 6 and pi over 3, they are very, very similar in the fact that they're the same numbers, except they go one way and then they go the other. So this one's going to be the square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. This one up here is going to be 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. There's a couple of ways you can remember this. One of the things I like to take note of is between the 6 and the 3 is the second part of my denominator. It is the second part of my terminal point. So I know that on pi over 3, the square root of 3 over 2 is the second part of my terminal point. So that means that on pi over 6, the square root of 3 over 2 is the first part of my terminal point. And then I know the other half of it will be 1/2 here and 1/2 there. The other thing you can note is we count from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. This would be the square root of 4 over 2. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 over 2 gets us 1. And it goes the same way this way. 1 is here. We're going to start up here at the 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. And again, this 1 is going to be the square root of 4 over 2, which is 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. So you can see how it counts down with the cosine, and it counts up with the sine, or the y values. So you just have to know which way it's going to go. It's going to start at the zeros. So at the 0, it counts up. At this 0, it will count down. Now, if you paid attention, and I showed you, and you noticed how this went straight across with the pi over 3, that terminal point will also come over here. So it's still going to be 1/2 and the square root of 3 over 2. And it's going to come down here. It's still going to be 1/2 and the square root of 3 over 2. And it's still going to be 1/2 and the square root of 3 over 2. The difference is what happens in the quadrant is the sign. Here they're all positive. And here you have to pay attention. This is the x part. X is negative on this side, but the y is still positive. So that means I'll have a negative here. Down in that's in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3, both the x and the y are negative, so we'll have 2 negatives here. And over in quadrant 4, my x's are back to being positive, my y is negative, so we'll have a negative sign there. And that's going to be the same for each of them. So if we pull the greens over, the pi over 4's, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, and we know that our x will be negative in quadrant 2. In quadrant 3, they're going to be square roots of 2 over 2, and they will both be negative. In quadrant 4, square root of 2 over 2, but the y's will be negative and the x will be positive. If we go to our pi over 6, they're going to go straight across. It's still the square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2, but our x will be negative. Coming down, it will be the square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2, and they are both negative in quadrant 3. Straight across, we have square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2, and here we have y's negative. So hopefully you are making the connections with our unit circle here and seeing how they really relate. You really need to understand the points and how they really are connected. You don't have to memorize it, you just have to understand it. And then make sure you pay attention to where that y-intercept is.